Okay. Good morning. I want to introduce an impressive panel here. In addition to Chris Brown, you've already met. Renee Carlson is responsible for global energy procurement at 3M, and she also brings a great utility perspective from her time at Xcel. And at 3M, she's responsible for global wind, solar, renewables projects. And then we have Amy Francetic. She's a senior vice president at Invenergy, where she's doing in charge of sourcing and integration of technology innovation. And she also has a unique perspective because of her days in private equity and as the CEO of the Clean Energy Trust. And then lastly, Aparna Narang, senior director of electricity and gas acquisition at PG&E. She actually oversees spend of $4 billion a year, so she's got a very big checkbook. Responsible for integrating renewables, and she's got a great background in the industry too, with time constructing wind farms, working for GE, Horizon, and Clipper. So we've got a lot of breadth of experience here and some good customer perspective, which really leads us into kind of the first thing we wanted to talk about. The diversification, the whole concept of diversification and the drivers from a utility and from an industrial customer perspective. So I thought maybe we could talk a little bit about how targets for renewables are set, how important, how firm they are, how the trade-off is evaluated between different types of renewables or long-term goals versus short-term shifts in pricing, and so on. And I actually thought, Aparna, you could probably start that one.
Yeah, sure. So good morning, everybody. It's great to be back here in wind. As Stephanie mentioned, while I'm here representing the utility perspective, I come from a background in construction and development and turbine manufacturing, so it's really great to be back here. So in regards to setting the renewables targets, as we think about it here in California, really, through the legislative process and through consumer kind of choice, that's really pushing forward more and more demand for clean energy. And so then the situation is then how does the utility then think about procurement? And how do we think about the electricity mix? And for us, we think about procurement in a way where we do consider, let's say, resource diversity towards meeting clean energy targets. And we do look at essentially the implications associated with, the current prices, where we think the forward prices are going to go in light of the current electricity mix and where we think it's going to head. And this spring has actually been a really interesting time for us. As many of you have heard, we've had experiences in living through the duck curve, where we've seen significant low prices in the middle of the day. And so what that means for us is thinking about resource diversity in a dynamic way, in terms of time of day, time of delivery value, the types of capacity and flexible capacity that resources can provide, and then the clean attributes that resources are providing as well. So it all needs to kind of come together. And at PG&E, we do have an incredibly diverse resource portfolio. We have almost 2,000 megawatts of wind in the resource portfolio, but every resource plays a distinct but complementary role in making essentially the system work and operate in terms of clean energy and reliability.
Great. So Renee, how about from your point of view as a commercial industrial customer? How do you look at the targets and trade-offs?
Yeah, absolutely. In addition to doing our renewable energy, I also buy our natural gas and electricity, and it's a very large for a manufacturer. We have over 200 global locations. We manufacture over 50,000 products, so the spend is very significant to us. Our supply base and our customer base, they want us to develop not only renewable packaging, but also use renewable electricity. So for a C&I customer, what's new for us and what's changing the way we buy electricity or natural gas is we need to get our hands on renewable energy. And whether that's through solar, wind, you all have large amounts of megawatts you can offer a large customer. So that's where we're looking to set those goals. For 3M, we have a 25% renewable energy goal. That's a big goal for us. So how do we then partner with utilities and developers to meet those goals? And do we do it through virtual PPAs? Do we start looking at on-site generation? We're not really a utility. Taking our load off the grid, makes us a different kind of expert in that. So that's really what we're up against in the C&I world is how do we meet these goals? How do we do it, that impacts us in a good way? And how do we continue to move them forward as it's something that the customer community is looking for?
And what's the source of your goal? How does that goal get developed?
I think it's new for C&I customers really within the last couple years. The goal was developed because we had, like I say, customers and people coming to us saying how much of your electricity really is renewable. And nobody wants you to count really what's behind the utility. We can't claim that. So our goal started by what we thought was fair. So let's put something out there of 25% and let's see what we can do in the future and expand on that.
Cool. Amy, what's your perspective based on Invenergy's mix of solar and wind?
Yeah, we, in addition, wind is the largest part of our portfolio. We have developed and have in construction 15 gigawatts of power, and that's across wind, solar, battery storage, and natural gas. And it's really important to us to try to always cite our projects and determine our contracts so that we can deliver the lowest possible price, but also to get really terrific efficiency out of the equipment. So there's been a lot of amazing improvements in the equipment to get better and better efficiency, but I think there's a lot of opportunity as a developer and an owner-operator to make sure that we're managing those assets as capably as possible so that we can deliver reliability, security, and affordability to the customers of our energy. So we're very, very interested in the control system layer of energy and how to manage that with some of the new digital technologies coming online.
Okay. Cool. Chris, you've been a utility executive as well as your current role. So,
Doug, old utility guys.
All right. What's your perspective on this?
I don't know. I think it's interesting because I listen. We start talking about goals, and from my perspective, it's more about if we can get the cost of energy down to where you don't think of us as a goal, but it's just like the cheapest source, then it's even better. So it's like it's a double bonus. I mean, obviously your customers and me, I'm your customer, want you to be producing products with renewables, but I don't even want to I don't want people to think about it. I want to say, if you're the lowest cost of energy, we'll choose you, wind, as opposed to, okay, there's an additional benefit. If we win that cost battle or that fight, then everything's else bonus.
Make it happen, Chris.
Yeah.
Hey, I was gonna go direct to you, but I think she'd have a problem.
So I think that's a good segue. The cost of wind has come down by 2/3 or so. Do you think we're getting to a point of diminishing returns?
No. My customers, I would ask, are the price of turbines going up?
Are they going up? They're
No, they're
getting
going
bigger.
down. They're going
getting
down.
bigger.
Is it
They're
despite
getting
what we're
bigger.
trying to keep in terms of, I think, look, competition is great.
Yeah.
Our competitors make us better, and I think that's benefiting everybody. My sense is that I think the fallacy is there's going to be a floor. Mm-hmm. I think, taller rotors, better technology, individual turbines. I mean, we're fighting each other, we're competing against each other, but we're also competing against solar and other forces of energy. I mean, Ben was like, hey, gas is out there too, so it's on.
There's a role to play for all these different resources as well. You look at the land use of renewables, you look at where you can site gas plants. I mean, there's challenges to all the different resources, but there's a role for them all to play. And I think the big thing that we need to look at is that the load is flat. All right, so the biggest thing that's going to continue to drive prices down is for us to be able to put more generation in the ground, and in order to do that, we need the older plants to retire. We need more electrification. We have to take seriously electric vehicles, autonomous vehicles. That's going to increase the load, and I think it's going to create more opportunity for all the different resources. So that's something to look at as a way to look into our future.
I think we got to be we have to be also diligent. Some of our politicians have said it's about all the above. But it's like, hold on. Like, I get that, but that should not be an excuse to turn the page back and give old technologies and incumbents the right to say, oh, no, we're going to turn back the page. That war is over. We've won that war.
Absolutely.
So all the above should mean all of the least cost above.
All the most competitive.
Right.
How about the most competitive is what should be participating in the markets, and the markets are designed for competitiveness. So let's let the markets do their thing. And the older assets need to retire. It's too costly to keep them online and to keep them clean, especially when you have such affordable resources now coming online. I mean, we're really excited about a lot of new solutions. We don't have any offshore wind, but I'm personally really excited to see offshore wind happen. I think that there's going to be remarkable advances in the technologies around the turbine design, around transmission on offshore wind, and that's going to benefit onshore. So I think there's a lot of, this is an exciting time to be in renewables.
And I think one other perspective to add, I'm not sure is this on?
You're on.
Yeah, great, is that it's the cost equation, but it's also the value proposition, right? So when we're thinking about, like, when wind first came to be, we were thinking about really the clean energy solution. Now it's really kind of tying back to the clean energy solution with reliability, and how wind is helping to provide reliability services, whether it's kind of frequency response, voltage support, or whatnot. And I think those attributes are going to become more and more important as part of the paradigm of getting to that cleaner economy, and the value that wind and other renewables are bringing to the equation.
But my sense also is that, I mean, I think that, you know, utilities maybe from our space used to be a bad word. And I don't think that's the case anymore. I think that utilities have also started to adopt where we're going and understand, hey, we can have them as assets. So, you know, not only is it an all-of-the-above energy strategy, but it's an all-of-the-above business model. You have to decide where you're going to play. But again, we're trying to serve, you're the ultimate customer. And you know, you have to do right by the investors, and you have to do right by the business models.
And real quick, just this industry has changed the way we buy electricity. The Texas market has changed. When I was buying a megawatt 3 years ago, it was super expensive. That has fallen now. So that's a really good thing for us when we operate our plants. This is really helpful. But the initial PPAs and the way it's structured, how do we work with you, the developers, to make them better? Because we're not a utility. So sometimes the PPA terms can be hard. So how do we continue to then make this better so that overall we're using that electricity, but we're making really good terms?
And how do you look at the PPAs and the virtual PPAs and, you know, those trade-offs? How do you assess that?
It's tough because does anybody have a crystal ball? Like we want that crystal ball, right? We want certainty. We want to know, are we catching the bottom of the market on a virtual PPA, or is it going to go, you know, up? Are we gonna, you know, there is a financial risk to it. So that whole game of, you know, getting the recs and what's best is definitely a tough thing to kind of interpret internally.
Yeah, I think that's where, I mean, to me, I think, like Ben was saying it, you know, FERC Order 2000 many, many years ago said this is what we should, you know, here's where the market is on. Right. But the next evolution is we're going to have some serious discussions about what that market design looks like. And we haven't evolved into where people, you know, we have a patchwork of different, you know, different states that have decided different things. ERCOT, you have no capacity payments. Other states, you're putting subsidies to capacity payments. That has to figure its way out. And I think you're going to have, I think developers and companies are going to vote with their pocketbook. When the cost comes down, they're going to move. So you better be, you know, you better line up that market to where you're keeping your key customers and providing value to them. Well,
I think let's talk about the role of transmission to get the power from where it is most cheaply produced, which is primarily in the rural areas. So 90% of the country's renewable energy, if you look at wind and solar, is generated in rural areas, and let's get it from there to where the load centers are, to where the customer is. That's a transmission play, really. That's what we need to think about, is investments in the infrastructure that will allow the grid to accept more renewables and to serve the customer with the cheapest, cleanest power available. I mean, we're very excited about the way that the federal government can support that, the way that FERC can deal with some of these challenges in transmission, the way that some of the markets like California can join in to sort of bring some of their renewable energy into other markets and vice versa, I think is really, to me, that you don't even need technology innovation for that. You just really need creative folks to get together and agree on some policy solutions.
But it doesn't have to be either or. It can be technology and market evolution. Yeah. So let's not make them the enemy of each other. Let's do both.
I think that the cost point, we all agree cost is critical, right? I'd like to understand maybe again from the customer perspective, when you look at the cost of wind or versus natural gas, for example, how do you value the risk or the absence of the risk of a gas price increase in the future? How does that go into your calculus? Maybe Aparna, you can.
Sure, so we do factor in essentially our estimates of kind of the forward curves. Forward curves are not perfect, and so we do actually perform hedging in terms of gas. But also taking a look at our portfolio, we have an incredibly diverse resource mix, I think, here at Pacific Gas and Electric. So we have gas, we have a really large hydro portfolio, so that actually helps with diversification and also cost management. We also have a nuclear facility, and we have a large renewables portfolio. So it's really kind of taking all that into consideration so that essentially the gas implications aren't as big of a driver as they might have once been. But it does factor into some of the decision making, but right now it's not as significant as it has been in the past.
But if the Ventex curve said you're at $120 a megawatt hour in 2050, do you believe it?
125 bucks?
$125 a megawatt. I mean, if you just follow that curve.
Oh, the hockey stick? Yeah, I'd always be cautious of a hockey stick.
You don't play hockey. You don't play hockey.
Yeah. And how far out is your planning horizon?
So as part of our long-term planning process in California, it tends to be like a 10-year planning horizon, but oftentimes we are looking, historically when we were looking at procurement, we were looking at like 10 to 20-year power purchase agreements. But now we're recognizing, the landscape is changing a lot. Every year is somewhat different, again, with the changing electricity mix that we're seeing, and that's actually driving changes to cost, changes to market prices, time of day use, as I mentioned before, and the types of kind of services that resources provide. So for us, it's trying to think about, okay, well, is the duration of those kind of power purchase agreements going to change? And then along with that, what might we need to be accounting for in the future with the uncertainty associated with the electricity mix, cost of storage, what's going to happen there? That's going to be a driver as well. So those are some of the considerations that we make. But then in terms of kind of long-term planning from a kind of a system perspective, we need to take into consideration then transmission, distribution, generation, all of it holistically kind of as one type of package.
I'm just so glad that California has sort of taken the lead from sort of a visionary standpoint to think about the future and beyond even this federal administration to be a leader in this area. I think we're all grateful for that and that we have a state as large as California leading the way. But I think storage especially, we're watching that very carefully. So storage plays a really critical role with renewables, wind and solar, and how you can get as much value as possible out of that storage investment to use it for peak shaving, for time shifting, for backup power, for capacity. That there's a lot of opportunity to make good use of storage, and really that is less so about the chemistry of storage, the material, and it's more about the digital control layer of storage. That's what's going to drive the most value out of that and help it serve its proper role on the grid.
Amy, do you see storage as being the next big game changer? Is that?
Well, I think we've been waiting for it to be that for about 5 years now.
Okay.
So no, I think the blend of storage, renewables, and transmission, that combination is what we think is transformative, really. And I think the market forces are behind that. And I think I look at the rest of the world, what's happening in the rest of the world and in countries that are never going to build out a grid like ours. How are they powering their countries? That's going to affect emissions around the world, and people are looking at that combination of, renewables and storage, smaller scale, linked with some of the centralized generation. That combination is going to be the way of the rest of the world. And so I think we cannot just be isolated in the U.S. to think our grid is the only way this is going to work. Those innovations in technology are going to come back to the U.S. Some of it is invented here and it's going to be scaled up elsewhere, but I think we're really watching how the rest of the world is moving in this direction as well.
Yeah, the parallel that I see is like telephones, right? At one point we all thought everyone was going to develop telephones. They all put in landlines and then switched to cellular, right? And then everyone else in the world just went directly to cellular. So
I would say from a customer perspective, we're doing it. We've got a megawatt of solar already going in California. We're looking in the territories where the tariffs are very friendly to us. 3M manufactures lithium-ion batteries. Battery storage is something we're absolutely looking at to help us with our peak.
But
we
is it
have
cost
some.
effective?
Not yet.
What high rise?
So, you would have to ask some of our really smart engineers there. But it's a reality because we're across the globe, and some of our plants across the globe shut down once a day.
Yeah, yeah.
So if we can figure this out globally, and whether it's wind or solar, and we can store it, that's definitely coming to the U.S. for us. So is it cost effective yet? We haven't found a spot, but shoot, you know, we're the engineers, we're making the products,
Yeah.
we're making the film, we're putting, you know,
Gotta make it happen.
adhesive on wind blades. So how do we kind of support the whole entire industry then to make it happen?
It is interesting. Everyone's dealing with all this uncertainty, right? And we're planning and doing all these horizons, and you know, I was struck looking at forecasts just the last day or two of showing, you know, all this great, you know, wind installations and then this cliff. And one of our customers was referring to it as the, you know, valley of death. And I think,
That was last year.
yeah,
Your opportunity this year.
yeah, it just feels like there are so many things that are still moving and changing.
If we get down
that-
on cost,
Yeah,
if
well,
we
no,
get
I'm
down on
agreeing
cost,
with
if
you,
we
Chris.
drive us down on
Yeah.
cost, we're going to create our own destiny.
Yeah.
So is it, what do you think the price in 2021 is going to be on a turbine?
You tell me, you know.
What do you need the cost to be to make it a $8,000-$10,000 market? I said $8,000-$10,000 gigawatt market.
The negotiation
Free?
is opening right here.
Exactly. Exactly. Bring it. No, seriously. I mean, 80% of 23 bucks a megawatt hour, it phases out. So we have to be facing that reality now and saying, hey, despite that happening, we're going to be a significant industry. If not, let's just pack up our bags and go to battery storage. But come on, it's not cost effective.
Look, it's not fun piecing a megawatt at a time together.
right.
You have tons of megawatts that you can offer a corporate industrial. You, all of you, together. There is an advantage you have, and that's what makes the long-term PPAs very attractive. It's how do you manage through the risk, because we're C&I and you're taking something through the PPA process that was mainly more applied towards utilities. So is there a way for us to partner and really kind of make it better?
Agreed.
So that we're going to you more and we're using that more. It's not fun piecing together solar.
No, I think, and again, I do think it's one of the strategic advantages that we have. We can do volume. I mean, you talk about, it used to be, you know, 30 megawatts was a big site, then 50. I mean, Stephanie, you know, 50, 100, 200 seems to be the average now of a site. 200 megawatts is a lot of energy. I mean, compared to some, if you compare, so we do have scale, you know, as a driver for us.
What also is the alternative, really? So looking beyond, you know, in after 2020, what is the alternative for generation? I mean, if load increases, as we hope that it will, then you're going to be looking at cost-effective power, and renewables are still going to be cost-effective. You're not going to be building new nuclear plants that are cost-effective. You're not going to be doing carbon capture to make, you know, the retiring coal plants clean enough. So I don't know what the alternative really is other than gas, and looking at gas and how that fits, and you still can't build gas plants at the scale that we need for some of these, you know, what we hope will be a rising demand in the areas where we need them. So again, you have to look at that combination, and I don't think wind goes away. I don't think we can see that far into the future. I think 10 years ago, we didn't see what was happening in natural gas, all right? So the energy industry has to be nimble. We have to be able to adjust to these changing economics, the changing technology. The innovation in technology has only driven prices down faster than everyone ever thought they could. So I think that that's the only thing to count on, is that evolution, that technology evolution improving. And then beyond that, I mean, it's going to be a whole new world when you think about gas, and a whole new administration. So I just don't think it's even worth worrying about it at this stage. I think you have to be bullish that we're going to be competitive at that point.
Let's spend a few minutes on the consumer perspective, because I think this is interesting. You know, the cost of wholesale power has gone down really consistently. I don't know if we get, as a reason for that, I don't know whether we get credit for that with the end customer, but what do you, there seems to be so much enthusiasm, you know, individual states, individual cities now, right, for, you know, renewables. How is that affecting our behavior? How are we capitalizing on that as much as we should? How is that changing your your procurement, Aparna. I mean, you've got some unique challenges there, right?
We do, yeah. California is an interesting place. So there's kind of multiple considerations, which is, as mentioned yesterday, the proposed legislation regarding acceleration of the RPS in California, 50% by 2026, and then raising it to 60% by 2030, and then moving towards a 100% kind of clean electricity mix here in California. And then also on the other side of the coin is thinking about the consumer behavior and what's happening behind the meter. And in California, there's already over 5,000 megawatts of behind the meter rooftop solar in the California ISO system. So that's a fairly significant amount, and that keeps growing every day. On top of it, we're seeing increasing amounts of distribution interconnected resources, so they're closer to load. So now it's a question of, okay, what's happening kind of in this part of the equation, and then what's happening in terms of larger scale kind of generation needs to kind of make up the difference. And that's something that, again, as part of the forward thinking process and planning process is going to be really important to think about kind of the multiple dimensions associated with, okay, what are the generation needs, what are the reliability needs, what are the transmission needs, distribution needs to actually make all of this work, and then what technologies and services kind of fit into that. And that is actually the challenge that we're facing today, or the opportunity, I should say, that we're facing today. And that keeps it incredibly interesting, but it does mean that it is a very different paradigm than what we've seen, I think, in the past.
I think that's got to be hard for the Dougs to deal with, right? No.
Dougs are smart too. I mean, they evolve, right? They're kind of like dinosaurs. I think, the issue, she's a Doug. But it would be a dumb old utility girl. No, but seriously, I don't think that, from my perspective, I think that utilities are evolving, and they're learning to deal with the new technologies. And, we have a pretty, we think about things in single years, but look, we have a 5-year phase down, and the industry is now should be celebrating that. And then we actually have a 6th year with the 80%. When you really think about where we're going, we have a time horizon here. We used to be in a 1- and 2-year cycle, and it was like this. Yeah. And now we're saying, hey, pick our horizons up a little bit, marry with the utilities that have the 30- and 40-year timelines, figure out how to have a little bit more patience and a little bit more, follow the cost curve down and figure out where the predictability comes. It kind of, we're maturing as an industry. So we have to take advantage of it.
I mean, just speaking from Broadwind's experience, I think when you have a planning horizon that's measured in more than quarters, yeah, right? All of a sudden, you can start thinking about investments that improve your productivity, improve your overall production performance, all those things, which of course then drive down costs further, which then help are supportive to the industry. So,
and you need volume.
Yeah.
So in terms of volume and time, you're going to get that cost curve coming down. So keep on buying, Amy. Come on, Renee.
We're doing the best we can.
Look, another point from a buyer who sits over all this, everybody talks about natural gas being cheap, but have you ever bought natural gas when that pipeline's curtailed? It's pretty expensive. And so, we rely upon that, but yet from a corporate perspective, your costs can just be really variable. If you're running a plant hard and you can't shut it down and there's a curtailment, that natural gas is really expensive to buy while everyone's looking at the NYMEX. So sometimes it's really getting people to understand how the physical markets equate. So if you can put more megawatts on the grid this way, we're all probably going to breathe a little bit of a sigh of relief, just to free up a pipeline infrastructure that is it hasn't been built out. It's really expensive to buy gas in the Northeast, and then you're generating electricity from it. That's a really expensive proposition sometimes when you're starting to look in the physical markets.
That's why we have to look at electrification for heating, electrification for cars. I think that's a really important consideration moving forward to balance out some of this risk, and the infrastructure around natural gas versus the infrastructure around electricity, which is pretty much in place to support a lot of these new electrification initiatives.
So last question. So just look forward 10 years and just tell me what your vision is 10 years out for wind. Or for power. All right.
So for power, a little bit of context. So PG&E currently is almost at 33% RPS, and we have an electricity mix that's almost 70% greenhouse gas free currently. And to get to that almost 33% actually took a bit of innovation. We actually worked towards increasing the flexibility and dispatchability of our hydro portfolio, of our thermal portfolio, and our renewables portfolio. So again, every resource is playing kind of a role in this. Looking out another 10 years, we're going to be looking at essentially the retirement of our nuclear facility, Diablo Canyon Nuclear Power Plant. And then also we'll be looking to the renewables industry again, looking towards the reliability services and really taking advantage of the reliability services that wind can provide and other resources can provide on the system as we look at some of these large resources retiring over time. And I think that's going to be really, really critical in order to continue moving forward across this kind of greater clean economy in California.
I think I'll maybe step out a little bit on policy on this one and say that I think within 10 years, you will see finally a tipping over of federal policy in the United States catching up with the rest of the world and looking at some kind of coordinated federal carbon tax or some way to actually level the playing field of the different generation sources. And I think in sync with, again, where the rest of the world is going, I feel like we're making advances despite the headwinds in DC right now. And I think that in 10 years, you have to remember there's going to be a whole nother generation of young people voting. There's hopefully going to be a whole nother generation of young folks in office replacing people that are going to be retiring. So I think that's going to open up great opportunities for federal policy. And I'm really hopeful that we're approaching the tipping point.
I think my job has changed a lot with renewables in 2 years. So I think it's going to change. The utilities are more willing to work with us to help us get the RECs. I think we're going to see our goals increase as far as renewable energy goes. And I think we'll keep moving forward on it, whether it's on-site or PPAs. I think you'll see the corporate customers really coming to look for more ways to put renewable energy into their portfolio mix.
Exciting.
5 years first. I think,
Okay.
5 years we're going to kill it. I don't see a lot of hesitation there. I think that going, 5 to 10, you'll see the industrialization of the renewable energy business. So in terms of maybe learning how to partner better with not only the people that we develop projects with, but our utilities, I think they'll play a larger role, a continued role. Transmission's not going anywhere. I mean, we have to figure out really that's to me, transmission and markets is where it goes. Obviously, there's some tension between the Internet of Things and the digitization. I think we'll get down to units. So turbines will be more, I'd say, individual than they will be specific in terms of where we're thinking about that. And so you're gonna have a lot more control. You think about Starbucks and what the customization or Google, people are gonna want a lot more for less. So it gets a lot more messy, but it's gotta be more elegant as well.
Great. Well, hey, I thank you very much. Could you please join me and give a round of applause to these guys? It was great. Thank you. Yeah, good job. Yeah, that's great.